Hey there folks, Zane from the Infinite Jukebox, aka the #1 Devo fan, here with another quick album review, and today I wanted to talk about the new Uranium Club record, Infants Under the Bulb. Bulb is just one of those words I hate, and I refuse to elaborate on why because I don't know. I don't think you should put the word bulb in your album title. It's just terrible. Uranium Club is one of the more well-known, one of the more well-regarded American art punk bands, experimental punk bands to have debuted since 2015, and one of the signature selling points of the band as a whole has been their lo-fi recording style and the raw DIY energy that in turn comes with that particular brand of punk. And now here we are with their latest studio album, Infants Under the Bulb, where they experiment with the idea of putting themselves in a more polished context. This is Uranium Club with some serious, legitimate studio-level production, and that is an experiment that will surely drive some people away. Records like 2016's All of Them Naturals were very rough around the edges intentionally, and because of that, they had this certain contagious energy about them. Like, you felt like you were hearing a band in a garage recording onto a cassette, and then that cassette got really worn over time, and then that's what you listened to. That's roughly about what Uranium Club have sounded like up to this point, at least. And again, that was a major selling point for them, and this is completely different as a whole. I mean, this will likely turn away some longtime fans who are looking for that sonic aesthetic. But all things considered, putting Uranium Club in a more professional, polished studio context, I think it works out pretty decently overall. It certainly isn't their best work, and I wouldn't recommend it to that many people outside of those I know who are really into the artsy side of modern punk, but at the same time, I think this could have gone a lot worse. While it does become immediately obvious listening to this record that the band just are more suited traditionally in sounding like they are being played through a really bad, really old stereo, I do think that the polish here does them pretty well so far, even if the much cleaner sound does highlight some of the cracks in their instrumentation here, some of the frantic guitar work sounding maybe a bit more rough than it usually does and not necessarily in a good way, or some of the percussion work here not necessarily standing out as much due to it kind of having more of a backbone role than it did on prior records where it contributed to the giant blob of noise that was often happening, etc. But as a whole, I think this is fine. The very crunchy atmosphere of their previous records definitely define them somewhat more than I really would have realized if it weren't for the fact that this album showed off how much it defined them in the first place, but they still managed to deliver some of the chaotic energy that they're known for on a track like 2600 Lullaby and some of the off-the-wall lyrical content that they've always been deeply associated with on tracks like Small Gray Man. And I think the primary highlight of the record comes in the form of the track Tokyo, Paris, LA, Milan, where you get melodic abilities being demonstrated there that feel power pop adjacent, and because of their somewhat abstract punk style, don't feel super out of place on maybe a late 70s album from the Graham Parker catalog, for example, and I mean that as a very high compliment. The biggest issue that I have with this album is the four-part spoken word track, The Wall. It's my main frustration with this album, and honestly, I feel like an entire half a star that I've docked from this is because of The Wall. It feels utterly pointless. It is a four-part spoken word track split up into three separate songs. Parts 1 and 2 are together, part 3 comes later in the album, and part 4 closes out the record. And it just serves no purpose. They don't really do anything to develop any overarching themes of the record. They don't come across as that interesting. They kill the momentum of the album just when it feels like it's starting to pick up at various places. And The Wall Part 4 closing out the album feels especially unsatisfying when it's such a jarring cutoff from the last proper song on the record, Big Guitar Jackoff in the Sky, which, although not my favorite song on the album, has enough high energy that it could have properly transitioned into a somewhat lower energy song that could have honestly closed out the album in a much better and more appropriate way. On the whole, however, Infants Under the Bulb is a pretty solid release, and I enjoy it well enough. I do think it's their weakest studio album to date, But, I mean, their first two were pretty great, so I guess I can't really complain too terribly much, and I don't think this record captures the best of Uranium Club or their most intense, energetic performances, but nonetheless, I still do think that it manages to become a fairly interesting step in a less garagey direction for the band. I just hope that maybe they handle it in a way that suits them a little bit more in the future. I'm going to give this record 3 stars out of 5. And with that being said, that is the end of this quick album review. I've been Zane from the Infinite Jukebox. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.